Let's get to, I want to update you on the story because, yes, this is breaking news. The report just a little earlier this afternoon that Hamas has agreed to accept some elements of the U.S. Deal to end the war in Gaza. This is the one put forward by Donald Trump, which would include giving up power and releasing all remaining hostages alive or dead. On the line, Rex Brynen, he's a professor of political science at McGill, specializing in these sorts of humanitarian emergencies and Middle East politics. Mr. Brynen, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. So you're aware of the story. This broke, as I said, only a little while ago. Give me your reaction to what you've heard so far.
I'm not surprised. It's a kind of yes, but from Hamas. They've agreed on the principle of releasing all hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners to be released by Israel. They've asked clarifications on other parts. They've accepted that a technocratic Palestinian government would be put in place in Gaza under this sort of international commission that would exist. However, they've said that has to be in keeping with the Palestinian national consensus. In practice, if any Palestinian technocrats are in power in Gaza, they're not going to do it without a green light from both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Otherwise, they'd just simply be looking like collaborators. So I think it's a positive move forward, but obviously Hamas not entirely happy with all aspects of the agreement, particularly since it doesn't really call for full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip in the end. So they're hoping to accentuate where they agree and get further details or some guarantees from the U.S. and from other parties.
So it would seem to me, as you outline this, the two obvious parts of this that seem the most, I guess, important are, number one, the release of all hostages, something that's been demanded now for so long. So that's a positive sign. The other part that you just mentioned now, this idea that they would give up power, you talk about installing what sort of a government to take over when they leave?
Well, it would be a government of experts, a government of technocrats. However, no one is going to volunteer for that job unless they have a green light from both Hamas and from Fatah, that is to say, the Palestinian Authority based in the West Bank. So Hamas knows they'll have a veto over who serves on that, and that's inevitable. There's frankly, no way around it. This is a position that Hamas has more or less held for more than a year now, so that's not necessarily a major change. They've also indicated willingness to release hostages as part of the deal that ends the war. What they're doing is emphasizing the parts where they agree and attempt to get more clarity in the parts where they don't agree. So a fairly smart move from their point, saying, yes, this is something we can work with, but we need some more details clarified and possibly modified.
There is obviously still the question, even with this, if you want to consider the major points, whether the U.S. and Israel will actually accept this. What's your thought on that?
They also praised Donald Trump's initiative, so they know how to go after his ego. I think that the Americans won't, particularly since Hamas is dangling the possibility of all the hostages being released, probably want to see if they can close the deal. That might not involve them changing the plan. That might involve bilateral promises through Qatar and Egypt to Hamas about various things. Hamas's biggest concern is the Israelis simply won't implement the deal. And it hasn't helped that Benjamin Netanyahu, in going back to sell this deal in Israel, has essentially said we don't really have to fully implement this deal. So they'll be looking for some guarantees that the Israelis will implement their deal, particularly given what happened at the beginning of the year when the Israelis kind of walked away from the four-stage deal that Donald Trump closed at that point.
I would ask as well, in trying to understand, because this is happening fairly quickly, I understand it did not address, at least so far, has not addressed elements in the American proposal that called on Hamas to give up its arms. Where are we on that?
Well, we don't know where we are on that. I mean, Hamas doesn't want to give up its arms. It wants a definition of what give up means and what arms means. Does it mean small arms? They'll be very reluctant to give up arms, and I frankly think even if they agree to it, they won't fully give up arms. So that is one of the things where they're not in agreement, and I think they're emphasizing where they are in agreement to try and get further details, clarifications, or modifications on their issues of concern.
I would ask you, just as we wrap up then, based on what you've heard and based on, what's happened in the past when we've had what we thought were deals, is this the closest, do you think, we've been to a real deal?
Actually, I think we were probably closer back in January, and then it fell apart. However, this is the closest we've been recently, so this is positive. The fundamental deal has got a whole series of problems with it. I doubt that it will be fully implemented, but this is at least half a step forward.
And what do you think happens next?
I think there's going to be frantic, quiet diplomacy between Washington, Qatar, Hamas, Washington, Egypt, Hamas, Washington, Israel, and most of that won't be in the public domain.
Okay, and you don't imagine we'll have news on this? I mean, the original plan was if he did not have a deal, I'm speaking he of Donald Trump, by Sunday night, that they would continue the military onslaught in Gaza. So is Sunday night the deadline here still, do you think?
Well, I think Trump very much wants a deal. He wants a Nobel Peace Prize, after all. The Israelis do not particularly like this deal. They'd be perfectly happy if it fell apart. So they'll actually be pushing, I think, Trump to say, no, okay, it's too late. But the Americans may want to see what they can get out of this. And the Arab states will be leaning heavily on the Americans to continue negotiations.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Mr. Brynen, always appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Rex Brynen over at McGill University on this deal between, partial deal anyway so far, which would include release of all hostages by the Palestinians and them giving up power in that particular part of the world, in Gaza. All right, let's get you caught up on the news. Jason is next. We'll come back on the other side. We'll check in with Tom Mulcair, get his take on what's going on today, including the visit by Mark Carney to meet with Donald Trump for only the second time and what we can expect from that, if anything. That's next.
Introducing Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio. Hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
Join me for an insider look on a wild ride through 40 years of global rock and roll.
Bryan Adams Radio. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Or ask your smart speaker to play Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio.
Who's ready to rock?
Kids wanna rock.